And as we gather in prayer today, we're going to do things a little bit differently, and that's okay. It's hard to comprehend the billions of stars overhead, but if you've noticed, when you focus on one star, the rest seem to come into view. So when it comes to taking a moment in prayer to remember the impact of September 11th, 2001 on our nation and world, we also find it hard to concentrate. There's so many billions of directions in which memory and healing and hurt can unfurl. So in order to focus us, Bill and Christine and I will read portraits of 10 individuals who died that day. And then with specificity and a little bit more embodied focus, we will lift up our prayers to God. And at the end, 20 bells will toll to remember 20 years.
Even in a family of 12 siblings, Roseanne Lang stood out. She danced the longest, sang the loudest, even though she couldn't carry a tune, and she loved the fiercest. At 42, Miss Lang was an equities trader at Cantor Fitzgerald. She was the first girl after her parents had 6 sons.
Gertrude Allegro was senior vice president at Marsh Private Client Services and planned to marry Peter in Boston on January 5th. A few days before the terrorist attack, Peter said that she pressed her fingers to his mouth while they were walking toward the subway from their Upper West Side apartment. "Shh," she said, "I need to tell you something. I am the luckiest woman in the world."
Big hugs is how Thomas R. Clark used to announce his arrivals home to his wife Lisa, a prelude to wrapping his arms around her. When their only son, Matthew, was 2 and grew old enough to speak, he asked for a piece of the action too. "Me too," he'd squeal. Soon, Mr. Clark changed his opening line to family hugs. Mr. Clark worked at Sandler, O'Neill, and Partners. "We still do it, the 3 of us," Mrs. Clark said, and my son still smiles. He loves it. Mr. Clark was 37.
Math and mitzvahs, those words rang through his family's memories of Stephen Furman, Cantor Fitzgerald. He was 2 days shy of his 41st birthday. Mr. Furman's math score on his SATs was 790 out of 800. He always wondered where the other 10 points went, his brother said. He knew he'd gotten them all right. He didn't have a fancy house or a fancy car, said his sister. The more money he made, the more money he gave away.
Every year, just before Thanksgiving, Thomas Haskell, age 37, battalion chief for the Ladder Company 132 in Brooklyn, would start disappearing into the basement of his home for hours, forbidding anyone to come down. He stayed up till 3 a.m., his wife said. Then, about 2 weeks before Christmas, his wife and daughters and friends and relatives would be invited downstairs to see an elaborate winterscape with hundreds of tiny ceramic figurines surrounded by ski chalets with 3 separate trains running through it all. Christmas of 2000, he built 3 miniature towns, Meganville, Ehrenberg, Tarrytown, named for his daughters, and Barbara's Garden for his wife. Behind them all was a dark blue night sky lit up with electric stars.
Timothy Haskell trained his Dalmatian Blaze to stop, drop, and roll. He took the dog to school where his sister Dawn teaches. Timmy would say to his dog, "Your clothes are on fire. What do you do?" Blaze would stop, throw herself on the ground, and roll. He would ask the kids, "What if you smell smoke?" And the dog would crawl on his belly over to a door. Timmy would say, "Feel the door to see if it is hot," and the dog would put her paws on the door. Timothy's brother Thomas also died in the World Trade Center attack.
Kenny Marino was a firefighter with Rescue One in Manhattan. His favorite baseball player was Ken Griffey. After he died at the World Trade Center, his wife Katrina emailed Ken Griffey and asked him to hit a home run for her husband. On September 25, Ken Griffey, in his second at-bat against Philadelphia, obliged Mrs. Marino. He said it would always stand out as one of the most memorable he'd ever hit. The bat was later given to Mrs. Marino and her 2 children.
Leo Roberts spent every day stalking the sidelines. Fall meant Michael's soccer matches and Jeffrey and Daniel's football games, and winter for Taylor's competitive cheerleading. His wife said we would get up and we would plan who would be on what field with which kid. That's the way we lived. We lived for our kids.
David Silver had a 2-year-old daughter, Rachel. The shape of her eyes and nose are his. She's going to be tall, just like her father, said her mother, who was 9 months pregnant when David died on September 11th. On Friday nights, he often surprised his wife with a bouquet of flowers that he had bought at Grand Central Terminal. It's like Friday night, and I expect him to come with a bunch of flowers. It's hard.
Patricia Green Watton is planning a memorial service and a baptism. Her husband Rodney disappeared in the attacks on September 11, and their son Rodney Patrick was born 8 days later. It's like death and resurrection, she said. The baptism was to have been a happy occasion, but it's a sad thing knowing that Rod will not be there for the baby's baptism. Mr. Watton, 36, who worked at Fiduciary Trust, never found out whether his child was a girl or a boy.
With these men and women on our hearts and thousands more, let us pray. God of mud and breath, you mold shapeless dust and into it whisper life. From dust we have come, and to the dust we shall return. And so we remember that before there was war, revenge, or terror, there was something more fragile and beautiful, a fierce love and kindness in the chaos. Before there was a gun, there was a garden. Before there was a nuclear arsenal, there was a big bang. Before there was malice, there was possibility. We mourn all over again 20 years later because our grief is wrapped up in the magnitude of loss, and because deep down in the center of things, we know there must be another way. The fragments of debris from that crystal morning 20 years ago force us to stand vigil, waiting and watching and living for a fleeting vision of your kingdom, where love and joy, peace and patience, kindness and goodness, gentleness and self-control prevail. Bouquets of flowers, home runs, Dalmatians, baptisms, family hugs, the song and dance of those who died. It reminds us that love is stronger than hate. So shift us, O God, and awaken us. Turn us and move us and put in our midst your peace that passes all understanding, a peace within and a peace between. For all those who mourn, whether a grief carried these many years or the fresh infinity of this year's loss, we offer up prayers. For all those who serve, whether on the front lines or as essential workers or as good Samaritans along the broken way, we lift up our prayers. For all those who hope for a possible peace and the promise of healing, Lord, hear our prayer. And now we ring the bells, and in the silence between, hear our prayer, O God.